Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and with another Next Fest kicking off today, I want to point out some excellent demos on display that I think are well worth your time. As usual, my focus is on strategy, tactics, sim, and management type games, and if you have any additional thoughts on the games you see here or others you see during Next Fest, feel free to drop them in the comments down below. If you enjoy the demos you play, remember to add the games to your wishlist, as it's a great way to support indie developers especially, helping them gain visibility on Steam, and if this video helps you find something you like, consider hitting the like button. Now, with no more time to waste and with timestamps down below, let's begin. Norland is a game I've had my eye on for a while now, and with the demo finally playable this Next Fest, you'll see exactly why. A colony management game in the vein of RimWorld and Clanfolk, Norland places extra weight on the importance of the ruling family, using that as a starting point to make a difference across all the standard trappings of the genre. Your colony consists of two primary types of citizens: the commoners, who do all the laboring and building and farming, etc., and the nobles, who are responsible for bolstering the productivity of said commoners, for leading armies, for studying books that unlock new options and technologies, and for dealing with other towns on the world map. As a result of this pairing, you'll have a fairly direct representation of your interests in universe, and you'll want to keep your noble family alive, keeping them safe from both foreign threats as well as internal ones. Keeping your people happy is, as always, paramount. Make sure you're keeping them fed and watered, assigning workers to the right tasks to keep the supply chains running, while ensuring your nobles have their time to go around to give pep talks and bolster productivity, without letting other responsibilities fall by the wayside. You'll build gallows to punish those who fall out of line, you'll adjust the cost of goods to make sure the commoners can afford what they need, even though they're the ones who produced it in the first place, but that's a different conversation for another time, and you'll maintain the relationship between nobles, internally and externally alike. Loyalties within your realm aren't just between commoners and nobles, no. There can be plots brewing between your nobles, plays for power, romances, and much more besides. You'll need to use the very same nobles to navigate and investigate these plots and intrigues, and at times, exploit them. Looking outside of your own realm, you can send nobles and messengers out to nobles in other cities and look to build relations, establish trade, or incite rebellions. A king who hates you might have an heir that would ally with you, so why not send a messenger over to ensure that succession takes place sooner rather than later, and secure safe borders or essential goods for your people? There are a variety of interesting ideas in Norland, and coupled with the charming art style and the usual aspects of the genre like mood and need management, supply chain management, so on and so forth, this is looking like a very promising title. I can highly recommend checking the Next Fest demo out. Shadow Gambit: The Cursed Crew is the exciting upcoming title from Mimimi Games, the folks that brought us Desperados 3 and Shadow Tactics: Blades of the Shogun. Quite literally, genre-defining games. For the first time, the developers are exploring a setting that really doubles down into the fantastical, putting you in charge of a band of undead pirates aboard their ghost ship, locked in a war against a holy order of the Inquisition. You'll hop from island to island, choosing a party from a selection of 8 characters that you get to unlock in any order you prefer, with each character coming with unique abilities and limitations. When you have a mission queued up, you'll choose where exactly to make landfall on the associated island, planning your approach based on your familiarity with the island and how you want to go about accomplishing your objectives when on land. You'll be observing enemy lines of sights and patrols to plan your moves, sneaking around behind cover, and hoping to accomplish a variety of objective types across a variety of backdrops while engaging with a variety of enemy types stationed across the fantastical Caribbean islands. The open approach here is really interesting. With multiple missions situated on the same island at times, you'll grow intimately familiar with the geography of some, while others will remain full of surprises until later. How the developers build their missions to operate around that openness is really interesting, with infiltration and exfiltration points open to player discretion, allowing you to carve your own path based not only on how much of a challenge you want to take on, but also on which characters you've decided to bring with you. Apart from different weapons and supernatural abilities, different characters have different limitations to where and how they can move. This can be as simple as the fact that some can swim while others can't, or how some can climb vines while others can't, but it goes beyond that. With the right character in your party, for example, you can fire your allies over walls with the help of a trusty cannon. Alternatively, some characters might make their way through walls by simply swimming under them, even when there is no water to be found. The supernatural touch opens things up very nicely here, and I'm a big fan of the overall setting and sense of style too. I highly recommend checking the Next Fest demo out, as the true thrill of the game is not the easiest to explain through a short segment in a bigger video. The tension that comes with close calls, the feeling of bliss when you pull off a particularly daring plan, and the sheer joy of seeing the zany antics play out even when everything's falling apart. Blockbuster Inc. is another movie-making tycoon game that takes me back to the Lionhead Studios game, The Movies. We've had a couple of games show up with this theme lately, and for what it's worth, Blockbuster Inc. certainly has its own flair and approach. Starting in the 1920s, you take control of an empty lot and are responsible for building up your offices, furnishing them, and hiring staff to produce, write, direct, and act in your movies, while also hiring staff to keep your studio clean, fed, and otherwise operational. Employee mood and schedule management play a key role in things, as unhappy employees make worse products, so you'll find yourself spending a lot of time optimizing the placement of your various offices and looking for the sweet spot in their timetables to make sure they're taking breaks, but not too many breaks. Producing movies takes time, and time is money. And money is also money. You'll build sets and upgrade them with all manner of cameras, mics, VFX toys, investing in the spaces where your movies will actually be shot, using money that you've earned by making movies to help make more movies, to help make more money. And the cycle goes on and on. But what's more, you don't just have to stick to the pre-built sets that the game comes with. You can actually go in and customize each set, nudging things around, placing actors, placing set elements, and placing visual effects pieces alike. The demo doesn't have too many toys to play with just yet, but the potential here is immense. When you're actually preparing a movie to film, not only will you need to choose who writes, directs, produces, and acts in it, but you'll also pick its genre and theme and age rating, all based on what you've unlocked through the research tree. And you'll even fiddle with what the film should focus on in terms of lore, storytelling, ambiance, gore, drama, so on and so forth. Then you determine what sets to shoot the various scenes on, tying back to all the time you may have spent building and designing custom sets, now with the ability to choose which of the sets is used for which scene, what animations each actor on set is using, what the camera is doing, so on and so forth. I wasn't able to tell if this had an impact on the actual box office results of the movie, but it's fun to play with, and it makes me think of the process in the movies a little. And I can definitely see great potential if the devs decide to tie this into how the movie actually does. Film an action scene with a super shaky camera where you can't see what's going on, and you instantly have a flop on your hands. Jokes aside, there are obviously very real consequences of having the same set be used for shooting two movies at the same time, so you have to find the optimal times and the optimal spread of sets, movie genres, and what's being shot where and by whom to make sure everything is moving smoothly. Seriously though, Blockbuster Inc. has some really interesting ideas, and the demo lets you play from January to December of 1920, giving you ample time to build quite a foundation for your legacy. I can definitely recommend checking it out during Next Fest. These Doomed Isles is an interesting turn-based, card-based survival city builder that has you playing God, looking to appease your people to maintain their faith and keep them as followers you can use, while at the same time exploiting them to do the very things that keep them happy in the first place. Farm food, serve at the tavern, so on and so forth. While turn-based, card-based survival sounds like a bunch of buzzwords stuck together, we are very much in an era of genre hybridization and experimentation. I welcome it personally, and sometimes we get some excellent results. Here, we have elements of deck building, puzzling, and strategizing as you manage your hand, your deck, and your resources, all while expanding your city and fending off enemy raiders alike. It's a combination of systems that works nicely, getting more intense as you go on, and it's interesting to work around the limitations of the card-based formula while also having to concern yourself with things like adjacency and limited space to work in. You won't always have access to what you need, and you'll have to plan ahead based on what you know is in your deck versus what's in your hand at any given time. On top of that, you have very limited space to work with, and since buildings need to be near resources or other buildings to actually operate, you have limited valuable space within that limited space you have to begin with. The compounding effect has a lot of potential as you get further along. Now, with the help of the resources that you have on hand, you'll place forests, woodcutters, houses, taverns, watchtowers, and even land itself. You are a god after all. As the seasons go by by turn, you'll earn resources from each of your placed items if they're appropriately placed, and if your followers are properly distributed to work at the various structures. Every year, you'll be able to spend some of your hard-earned resources to unlock additional cards, diluting the likelihood of getting any specific card, but giving access to additional resources or more powerful tools besides. Some cards allow you to cast spells, for example, spells that can come in handy when dealing with foreign raiders. Either way, as all this is happening, you're actively working towards a series of objectives that, should you accomplish, will give you some added boons. If you fail to accomplish them within the allotted time, however, you'll be hit with debuffs. Sometimes a single objective renews over and over again if you keep failing it, with the debuffs stacking until you eventually get the job done. So, no, your gameplay isn't a purely sandbox experience. It is objective-driven in some ways, tallying up your score when you finish a level off, and hinting at the potential of a leaderboard perhaps? There will be 3 gods with unique sets of cards to start with in early access, but as of the Steam Next Fest demo, you'll be able to play as 2 of them to see just how varied they are. Then, as early access goes on, more card sets, gods, and enemies will come through. I can't wait to see how these Doomed Isles builds on what seems to be a very solid foundation, and I think it's worth checking out during Next Fest. Xenotheria is another interesting deck builder, this time as an isometric RPG with turn-based tactical combat, where you have a party of a few characters stranded on some desert planet where something's gone down and you're investigating. The mechanics here are going to be familiar to fans of the subgenre in some ways, while introducing fresh ideas in others. Apart from the usual trappings of isometric RPGs like finding loot and exploring the lore, the way you go about upgrading your characters when they gain experience is a little different than the usual. This being a deck builder, every time your characters level up, you'll spend their earned skill points to upgrade their cards. Each character has their own set of cards, representing their offensive, defensive, and support capabilities, and each card has its own upgrade tree, so you'll have to choose which upgrade to take when, sometimes stockpiling skill points for a juicier upgrade, forgoing a cheaper one that could make things easier in the meantime. Some upgrades are simple enough, increasing the damage output of an attack card, for example. Others are a bit more involved, changing how a card behaves entirely, having its attacks apply status effects to the enemy, or otherwise changing how it interacts with other aspects of your characters. For example, some characters rely on charges to strengthen their other abilities, and those charges can do more or less based on upgrades you've pursued. It's an interesting way to use the leveling up aspect of RPGs in the context of a deck builder, and beyond these upgrades, you can also spend your loot to actually acquire more cards. If you find your current deck to be insufficient in some ways or balanced in a way that's not quite working for you, you can rearrange it at any time, but to actually have more of a card in that deck, you'll need to spend some loot to actually make the card. There are caps to how many of a card you can have just to keep things reasonable, but this aspect of the game will undoubtedly become more and more important to stay on top of as you make progress through it. In combat, you're fighting on a grid, and each turn, you draw a fresh hand from a deck that compiles cards across all of your characters, and you'll try to find synergies between your characters with your hand on hand, determining what you can do or not do in any given turn. There are range limitations on attacks, and movement around the grid costs the same energy points that it actually costs to use a card as well, so sometimes you'll have to, for example, push and pull enemies into range of another attack, or otherwise hold off on certain moves to maximize opportunities elsewhere. You'll take cover against the more threatening enemies, you'll brazenly charge into battle against the weaker ones, you'll knock them into each other, you'll set them on fire, and you'll discover some really fun abilities that your enemies have, learning their patterns over time to overcome them more efficiently. Xenotheria has some really fun ideas, and it's very easy to get into. I highly recommend you do so during Next Fest. But there you have it, folks, a few games worth checking out during this Next Fest. There are a lot more on display, of course, and I'll definitely try to check out more over the course of the upcoming days. If you have any preferred picks or recommendations of your own, feel free to drop them in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to hit the like button on your way out. Make sure to subscribe for more strategy, sim, city building, and management type gaming related news, reviews, previews, let's plays, and more. And as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.